The massive ship appeared above Earth without warning. It was bigger than any city, its dark metal hull blocking out the stars. Strange lights pulsed along its sides like a heartbeat. Captain Dong-woo stood on the bridge of the Korean Space Defense Station, watching the alien vessel hover over Seoul. His coffee had gone cold in his hands. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Lieutenant Park at the communications desk. Her voice shook slightly. It's in perfect Korean." Dong-woo set down his cup. In his 30 years of military service, he had seen many things, but nothing like this. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was deep and cold. It spoke Korean with no accent, as if the speaker had known the language forever. "Primitive species of the third planet. I am Admiral Vexitar of the Valerian Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. You have 72 hours to surrender all military forces and submit to Imperial rule. Resistance will result in cleansing protocols. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of computers. Dong-woo looked at his crew. Some stared at their screens. Others looked at him, waiting for orders. He had always been known for staying calm under pressure. Today would test that. "Reputation. Get me the president," he said quietly. While his communications officer worked, Dong-woo studied the alien ship through the station's telescopes. It was clearly built for war, with weapons that could probably destroy entire cities. But something bothered him about its design. The ship looked too clean, too perfect, like it had never been in a real fight. Across the city, Dr. Hae-jin was already working in her lab at the university. As soon as the alien message had broadcast worldwide, she had started analyzing it. The language patterns were fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Hae-jin was one of the world's best experts on how languages worked. She had studied dozens of human languages and could often figure out how people thought by how they spoke. The alien message told her something important. These creatures had done this before. Many times. The words they used were practiced, like a speech given 1,000 times. But there was something else. The aliens had words for surrender and submit and cleansing. They had no words for negotiate or discuss or long war. Their language was built for giving orders, not for fighting equals. Her phone rang. It was the emergency council that had formed in the hours since the aliens arrived. They needed her expertise. "Dr. Hae-jin," said President Kyung-soo over the video call. "What can you tell us about these Valerians?" She looked at her notes. "Mr. President, based on their language patterns, I believe they have conquered many worlds before ours. But I don't think they have ever faced real resistance. Their entire way of speaking suggests they expect immediate surrender." "What happens if we don't surrender?" asked General Lee, the head of the military. "I think they genuinely don't know," Hae-jin replied. "Their threats about cleansing protocols sound serious, but their language suggests they have never actually had to follow through. Every other species they have met probably gave up right away." Captain Dong-woo joined the call from his space station. "I've been studying their ship," he said. "It's powerful, but it's designed for intimidation. Look at these energy readings." He shared his data with the group. "Their weapons are built to destroy cities and scare populations, but their defenses have gaps. Big ones. They're not expecting anyone to shoot back." The president was quiet for a long moment. Around the world, other leaders were having similar conversations. Most were preparing surrender documents. The alien ship was simply too big, too advanced, too terrifying. But President Kyung-soo had been a soldier before becoming a politician. He had fought in small conflicts where his country faced much larger enemies. Sometimes he had learned the biggest opponent was also the most vulnerable. "How long do we have?" he asked. 72 hours, Dong-woo replied. "Then we use every minute. General Lee, begin emergency evacuations of all major cities. Move people to the mountain bunkers and underground facilities. Dr. Hae-jin, I need you to learn everything possible about how these aliens think." "Captain Dong-woo." Gather every military commander in the system. If these aliens have never faced resistance, then it's time they got an education. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. While most of the world's leaders tried to negotiate surrender terms, Korea prepared for war. They were not alone. Several other nations, led by commanders who refused to give up, quietly joined the preparation. The aliens seemed confused by the evacuation. Their ship moved closer to Earth, probably expecting to see crowds of people begging for mercy. Instead, they found empty cities and silent streets. In the underground command center beneath Seoul, Dongwoo met with dozens of military officers from around the world. They had spent 72 hours planning for something that had never been tried, before fighting back against an alien invasion. "They think we're animals," said Colonel Martinez from Mexico. "Let's show them what animals do when cornered." "The key is surprise," Dongwoo explained, pointing to the tactical displays. "They don't expect resistance because they've never faced it. That gives us one chance to hurt them badly before they adapt." Dr. Haijin had been working without sleep, analyzing every communication from the alien ship. "I've learned something important," she announced to the room. "They're not just confident, they're arrogant. Their messages show they believe themselves to be gods dealing with insects. That kind of thinking makes people careless." The countdown reached its final hour. President Kyung-soo stood in the command center, surrounded by the people who would either save humanity or die trying. The alien ship hung in the sky above them, waiting for an answer that would change everything. "Send the response," the president said quietly. Dr. Haijin had prepared the message carefully. It was short, in perfect Valerian language, using words and grammar that would shock the aliens. The message was simple but revolutionary. "We decline your offer. If you want our world, come and take it." Above them, Admiral Vextar received the response on his command deck. For the first time in his centuries of service, he felt something he had never experienced before: confusion. In his language, the human response was not just defiant. It was impossible. No species had ever said no to the Valerian Empire. His hesitation lasted only moments. Then anger replaced confusion. If these primitives wanted to be cleansed, he would oblige them. The bombardment began immediately, but as the first energy blast struck empty buildings and deserted streets, Admiral Vextar began to realize that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had not cowered. They had prepared, and they were about to teach the Valerian Empire what war really meant. Admiral Vextar watched his ship's weapons tear apart Seoul's skyline. Buildings collapsed in clouds of dust and fire. The bombardment was precise and devastating, designed to break the spirit of any watching population. But something was wrong. There were no screams, no crowds running in panic, no desperate calls for mercy. The city was empty. "Sir," reported his weapons officer, "all primary targets have been destroyed, but we're detecting no casualties." Vexatar's scaled face twisted in confusion. In 500 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. Species always gathered in their cities when the bombardment began, hoping their leaders could negotiate surrender. The sight of their civilization burning usually broke their will to resist within hours. "Scan for population centers," he ordered. "Sir, the humans appear to have evacuated. We're detecting massive underground structures, mountain complexes, and distributed populations across rural areas." This was impossible. Evacuation on this scale required months of planning. How had these primitives known to prepare? Far below the burning city, Commander Minho was already moving. His lunar mining base had been converted into a military facility during the 3-day preparation period. The aliens had dismissed it as a simple industrial operation. They were about to learn otherwise. Minho's team was small, only 30 people, but they knew every inch of the moon's surface. More importantly, they understood how mining equipment could be weaponized. The same tools that carved tunnels through rock could punch holes through alien ship hulls. "Target acquired," whispered his weapons operator. Valerian supply vessel, moving toward Earth. The supply ship was smaller than the main dreadnought, but still massive by human standards. It carried food, weapons, and reinforcements for what the aliens expected to be a quick occupation. Minho smiled grimly. Time to make their job harder. Fire. The modified mining laser struck the supply ship's rear section. The beam, designed to cut through asteroid rock, sliced through alien armor like paper. The ship began to spin, atmosphere venting from the wound in its hull. Direct hit. Enemy vessel is damaged but not destroyed. Then hit it again. The second shot punched through the ship's cargo bay. Explosions bloomed along its side as stored. Ammunition cooked off. The vessel lurted toward the moon's surface, out of control. Minho opened communications with Earth. Command, this is Lunar Base 1. First supply ship is down. Repeat, we have a kill. On Earth, Lieutenant So Young received the message in her underground command post beneath Busan. The lunar attack was working perfectly, but her job was just beginning. The Valerians were about to land ground forces, and she needed to make sure they found a very different world than they expected. So Young had been a subway engineer before the war. She knew every tunnel, every maintenance shaft, every hidden passage in Korea's underground transportation network. During the 3-day preparation, she had turned this knowledge into something deadly. The first Valerian dropships descended over Busan like falling stars. Each one carried 50 alien soldiers in powered armor, expecting to secure a major population center within hours. Instead, they found a ghost town with no visible defenders. The aliens moved through empty streets, in perfect formation. Their training was excellent, their equipment superior, their confidence absolute. They had done this 1,000 times before on 1,000 different worlds. That confidence lasted until they reached the first intersection. So Young had spent 2 days placing explosives throughout the city's underground infrastructure. When the alien column reached the predetermined point, she triggered the charges. The street collapsed, swallowing half the alien squad in a crater filled with rubble and twisted metal. The surviving aliens looked around in confusion. Their sensors showed no human forces, no weapon signatures, no threats, but their squad was gone. Welcome to Earth, So Young whispered from her hidden position. Then she triggered the second set of charges. This explosion came from below, as subway tunnels collapsed beneath the aliens' feet. More soldiers vanished into the underground maze. The remainder tried to retreat, but So Young had planned for that too. Every exit route led to more traps, more ambushes, more carefully prepared surprises. What should have been a simple occupation was becoming a nightmare. In space, Admiral Vextar was receiving similar reports from across the globe. His ground forces were taking casualties at an impossible rate. Human resistance fighters were appearing everywhere, striking his troops and vanishing like ghosts. How many humans are we fighting? He demanded. Unknown, sir. They use hit-and-run tactics. Our forces rarely see them before being attacked. Back on the moon, Minho was preparing his next surprise. The Valerians had sent fighters to investigate their destroyed supply ship. The small, fast vessels were heading directly for his base, probably planning to eliminate the threat quickly. Minho had anticipated this. His people had spent the last day preparing something special. Release the drones, he ordered. What the aliens saw looked like space debris, chunks of rock and metal floating near the lunar surface. What they actually were was a swarm of modified mining robots, each one equipped with explosive charges and simple guidance systems. The Valerian fighters flew directly into the trap. The mining robots activated simultaneously, their magnetic clamps attaching to the alien ship's hulls. Seconds later, they exploded. 3 fighters died instantly. The 4th managed to escape, but not before its pilot sent a panicked message to the main fleet. The humans are using kamikaze tactics. Our ships are not safe anywhere. On Earth, Dr. Hyjin was monitoring all Valerian communications from her underground facility. Her language skills had improved dramatically over the past week. She could now understand most of what the aliens were saying to each other. What she heard was music to her ears. The Valerian military used very formal language, with specific words for different types of operations. They had words for conquest, occupation, and pacification. But in the last few hours, she had started hearing new words. Words like resistance, casualties, and unexpected developments. Most interesting of all, she had intercepted several messages where Valerian officers used a word that roughly translated to confusion. Their language had this word, but it was rarely used in military contexts. The fact that it was appearing now meant something important. The aliens were facing something they had never encountered before. "Command," she reported to President Kyung-soo, "the aliens are losing confidence. Their communications show increasing uncertainty and frustration. I don't think they know how to handle our tactics." In Seoul, Taiwan was proving her point. The metro worker had turned the city's subway system into a fortress. The tunnels that had once carried commuters now carried soldiers, weapons, and supplies. The stations had become command posts. The maintenance areas had become armories. When Valerian troops tried to enter the underground network, they found themselves in a maze designed by someone who knew every pipe, every wire, every hidden passage. Taiwan could move freely through his domain while the aliens stumbled through unfamiliar territory. He had just finished setting up his latest surprise when his radio crackled. "Taiwan, this is Surface Team 3. We have 50 aliens moving toward Entrance Delta." "Understood," Taiwan replied. "Send them down." The surface team retreated into the subway entrance, firing just enough shots to make the aliens think they were chasing a small group of fighters. The Valerians followed, eagerly expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves in a tunnel system that defied logic. Passages led to dead ends, escalators had been turned into slides leading to lower levels, and every turn revealed new obstacles. Taiwan watched them through hidden cameras, speaking into his radio. "They're in Section C. Activate the water traps. Emergency." Systems that had once been designed to flood tunnels in case of fire now served a different purpose. Water rushed through the passages, not enough to drown the aliens, but enough to slow them down and ruin their equipment. "Now the lights," Taiwan continued. The tunnel system plunged into darkness. The aliens had night vision, but it was designed for outdoor combat, not the complex underground environment Taiwan had created. What followed was not a battle but a hunt. Human fighters, moving through familiar territory, picked off confused aliens one by one. By the time the Valerian survivors managed to escape, they had lost 30 soldiers and learned nothing useful about human defenses. Admiral Vextar was beginning to understand that this was not a normal conquest. His species had built an empire by intimidating other races into submission. When that failed, they used overwhelming force to break enemy resistance quickly. But the humans were not breaking. If anything, they seemed to be getting stronger. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we're receiving reports of similar resistance on other worlds. Species that submitted to us years ago are beginning to rebel." This was the news Vextar had feared most. The Valerian Empire controlled hundreds of worlds through fear and the belief that resistance was impossible. If other species saw humans fighting back successfully, the entire empire could collapse. "Double our forces," he ordered. "Bring in the second fleet. These humans must be crushed quickly, before their example spreads." But as the admiral made his desperate plans, he did not know that Dr. War Prime Zethkul arrived at Earth aboard the massive supercarrier Eternal Throne, expecting to find Admiral Vextar's forces finishing the cleanup of a broken human resistance. Instead, his flagship emerged from hyperspace into the middle of a battlefield. Human ships were everywhere. They were small, crude vessels compared to Valerian warships, but they moved like angry wasps around the alien fleet. As Zethkul watched in disbelief, a converted human cargo ship rammed itself into the side of a Valerian destroyer, the explosion tearing both vessels apart. "Report," Zethkul demanded, his voice cold with fury. "Sir, the humans have been conducting constant raids for 2 weeks. They strike our supply lines, board our ships, and disappear before we can respond. We have lost 12 vessels and over 3,000 troops." Zethkul had commanded Valerian forces for 3 centuries. He had conquered 47 worlds and crushed a dozen rebellions. Never had he heard a report like this from a primitive world. "Where is Admiral Vextar?" "Sir, his ship was boarded 3 days ago. The admiral is missing." Far from the main battle, Captain Dongwu was proving that humans could adapt to space warfare faster than anyone had imagined. His flagship, a converted mining vessel called Soul's Hammer, drifted silently among the asteroids of the outer system. Dongwu had learned to think like a pirate. The Valerians expected honorable combat between fleets of warships. Instead, they faced an enemy that hid among space debris, disguised military vessels as civilian craft, and used the solar system's own geography against them. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, whispered his sensor operator. "Valerian supply convoy, 3 ships. Range? 4,000 kilometers and closing. They haven't seen us." Dongwu smiled. The supply ships were heading for Earth, carrying weapons and reinforcements for the ground war. They would never arrive. "All ships, this is Soul's Hammer. Begin the attack." What looked like empty space suddenly filled with human vessels. They had been hiding in the asteroid field for hours, waiting for this moment. The Valerian convoy found itself surrounded by enemies that had appeared from nowhere. The battle was brief and brutal. Human ships, armed with nuclear mining charges and guided by desperate courage, overwhelmed the alien escorts. The supply ships tried to run, but Dongwu had positioned his forces perfectly. Within 10 minutes, all 3 vessels were destroyed or captured. "This is Soul's Hammer to all units," Dongwu announced. "Convoy eliminated. Return to base for resupply." But Dongwu's greatest victory was not the destroyed ships. It was the cargo they had captured from the supply vessels: Valerian weapons, armor, and most importantly, technical manuals that would help humanity understand their enemy's technology. On Earth, engineer Jae-hyun was already putting this captured technology to use. Before the war, he had designed mining equipment and industrial machinery. Now he was becoming something the Valerians had never encountered: a human weapons expert. Jae-hyun worked in a hidden facility deep in the mountains of Korea, surrounded by captured alien equipment and teams of technicians who shared his desperate creativity. They had spent weeks taking apart Valerian weapons, learning how they worked and figuring out how to make them better. "The aliens are too confident in their technology," Jae-hyun explained to his team. "They never considered that someone might steal it and improve it." His latest project was a captured Valerian assault rifle, modified with human engineering. The original weapon was powerful but complex, designed for soldiers who had trained with it for years. Jae-hyun's version was simpler, more reliable, and could be manufactured in underground workshops across the globe. "Test fire in 3, 2, 1. The modified weapon fired with a sharp crack that echoed through the testing chamber. The energy bolt struck the target dummy dead center, burning through armor that would have stopped human bullets. "Perfect," Jae-hyun said with satisfaction. "Send the plans to all resistance cells. We can have 10,000 of these weapons in production within a week." In the ruined city of Busan, Sergeant Boram was already using captured Valerian equipment to deadly effect. Her squad looked like refugees, dirty, tired, carrying simple supplies. The aliens had learned to ignore such groups, assuming they were harmless civilians. This was exactly what Boram wanted them to think. Her team moved through the occupied city like ghosts, blending in with the actual refugee population. The Valerians had set up checkpoints and patrol routes trying to control the human population, but they couldn't tell the difference between real civilians and trained soldiers in disguise. "Target acquired," Boram whispered into her hidden radio. "Valerian Patrol 6 soldiers moving toward Checkpoint 7. Her squad was positioned around the patrol route, looking like civilians waiting in line for food distribution. Hidden beneath their ragged clothes were modified Valerian weapons and human-made explosives. The alien patrol walked directly into the trap. When Boram gave the signal, her soldiers opened fire from 6 different directions. The Valerians, caught completely by surprise, had no time to react. Within seconds, the entire patrol was down. Boram's team quickly grabbed the aliens' weapons and equipment, then melted back into the crowd of refugees. By the time Valerian reinforcements arrived, they found only confused civilians and no sign of who had attacked their soldiers. This scene was being repeated across Earth. Human resistance fighters had learned to use their own population as camouflage, striking at alien forces and disappearing before retaliation was possible. Dr. Hyojin was coordinating much of this activity from her hidden command center. Her breakthrough in understanding Valerian communications had made her the Earth's most valuable intelligence asset. She could now intercept and decode almost all alien military traffic. "We have a problem," she announced during the daily command briefing. "The aliens are bringing in their war prime. That's like their supreme commander. His ship is 10 times larger than anything we've faced before." President Kyung-soo studied the intelligence reports. "How bad is this?" "Very bad," Hee-jin replied, "but also an opportunity. I've been monitoring Valerian communications from other star systems. Our resistance is inspiring uprisings on other worlds. The aliens are facing rebellions across their empire." This was news that changed everything. Humanity was not just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for every species the Valerians had enslaved. "What do you need?" the president asked. "Broadcasting equipment, powerful enough to reach other star systems. If we can show the galaxy that humans are winning battles against the Valerians, it will encourage more uprisings." The equipment was built within days, assembled from captured alien technology and human ingenuity. Dr. Hee-jin's first broadcast reached dozens of worlds, carrying a simple message: the Valerian Empire could be defeated. War Prime Zethkul saw the intelligence reports about the spreading rebellions and felt something he had not experienced in centuries: fear. Not fear of death in battle, but fear of failure on a scale that could destroy the Empire. "Bring me Admiral Vextar," he ordered. "Sir, the Admiral is still missing. We believe he was captured during the raid on his ship." Zethkul's anger was cold and deadly. A Valerian admiral had never been captured by primitives. The very idea was impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. "Then find him, and prepare the Eternal Throne for orbital bombardment. If these humans want to fight like animals, we will treat them like animals." But as Zethkul made his plans for massive retaliation, he did not know that Captain Dongwu was preparing something special for his flagship. The human fleet had grown dramatically as more civilian ships were converted for military use. Mining, vessels, cargo haulers, and passenger ships had all been turned into weapons of war. Dongwu's plan was simple and insane: board the Eternal Throne and capture the most powerful Valerian commander in the galaxy. "This is Sol's hammer to all ships," he announced to his fleet. "Today we show the universe that no enemy is too strong, no ship too large, no commander too important. Today we take their flagship." The human fleet moved toward the Eternal Throne, like a swarm of angry insects. The Valerian ship was enormous, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. But Dongwu had learned that size could be a weakness as well as a strength. The Eternal Throne was too big to maneuver quickly. Its weapons were designed for long-range combat against other capital ships. When hundreds of small human vessels surrounded it, many of the alien weapons could not target them without risking damage to the flagship itself. The boarding operation was chaos. Human ships crashed into the alien vessels' docking bays, their crews pouring out to fight hand-to-hand combat in the corridors. Modified mining equipment cut through bulkheads while captured Valerian weapons blazed in close-quarters firefights. For the first time in his life, War Prime Zethkul found himself fighting for his own ship. Human soldiers had penetrated to the command levels, moving through his flagship like it was their own territory. When the battle ended, the impossible had happened again. The Eternal Throne was still functional, but it was under human control. War Prime Zethkul was a prisoner, and his crew was learning what defeat felt like. Captain Dongwu stood on the bridge of the captured flagship, looking out at the Valerian fleet that now faced a terrible choice: attack their own command ship. Captain Yunsu stood on the bridge of what had once been the Valerian cruiser Sky's Tyranny. The ship now bore human markings, and a new name painted across its hull: Liberty's Edge. 6 months ago, she had been a cargo ship pilot hauling supplies between Earth and the asteroid mining stations. Today, she commanded the most advanced warship in the human fleet. The transformation had not been easy. Valerian technology was sophisticated but alien, designed for creatures with different hands, different eyes, different ways of thinking. But humans were excellent at adapting, and Yunsu's crew had spent weeks learning to operate systems that no human had ever seen before. "Captain," called her tactical officer, We're approaching the target convoy. 3 supply ships with escort vessels. Yunsu studied the tactical display. The Valerian convoy was heading for their supply base on Jupiter's moon Ganymede, carrying equipment and reinforcements. It would never arrive. All stations prepare for attack. Remember, we want those supply ships intact. The Valerians are about to learn what it feels like to be hunted. The Liberty's Edge dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the convoy. To the Valerian crews, it must have seemed impossible. One of their own ships, flying human colors, crewed by the primitives they had come to conquer. The escort vessels hesitated for crucial seconds, uncertain whether to fire on what appeared to be a friendly vessel. That hesitation cost them the battle. Human fighters, launched from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt, swarmed the convoy before the aliens could react. Within an hour, all 3 supply ships were captured, and their escorts destroyed. More importantly, the crews of the supply vessels surrendered rather than fight to the death. Word was spreading through the Valerian fleet that humans took prisoners and treated them well, something that encouraged more aliens to give up rather than die for an empire that was clearly losing. Admiral Dongwu watched the victory from his command ship, Soul's Fury. He now commanded not just a single vessel but an entire fleet of converted civilian ships, captured alien vessels, and purpose-built human warships. The mining facilities in the asteroid belt had become shipyards, churning out new vessels as fast as raw materials could be processed. Operation Boomerang is proceeding perfectly, he reported to Earth Command. We've captured or destroyed every major Valerian supply depot in the outer system. Their ground forces on Earth are now cut off from reinforcement. The strategy was working better than anyone had dared hope. By controlling space around Earth, the human fleet was slowly strangling the Valerian occupation forces on the planet's surface. On Earth itself, Major Wu Jin was preparing to test whether human forces were ready to go from defense to offense. The city of Busan had been under alien occupation for months, but intelligence reports suggested that Valerian morale was collapsing. It was time to take the city back. Wu Jin's plan was audacious. Instead of the guerrilla tactics that had worked so well in the early stages of the war, he was going to launch a direct assault using conventional military formations. The difference was that his troops now carried captured Valerian weapons and wore modified alien armor. Remember, he told his battalion commanders, we're not fighting the same enemy that landed 6 months ago. These aliens are tired, scared, and demoralized. They came here expecting an easy victory and found a war instead. Today we show them what defeat looks like. The attack began at dawn. Human forces emerged from the tunnel systems they had been using for months, but instead of conducting hit-and-run raids, they moved in coordinated formations toward key Valerian positions. The aliens were caught completely off guard. Their defensive positions had been designed to repel guerrilla attacks, not conventional assaults by organized military units. Worse, the humans were using Valerian weapons more effectively than many Valerian soldiers. Checkpoint 7 is under attack, reported a panicked alien officer. The humans are using our own weapons against us. Reinforcements are moving to support, came the reply. But when the reinforcements arrived, they found the checkpoint already overrun and human forces moving toward the next objective. The battle for Busan lasted 3 days. When it ended, the city was back in human hands, and over 2,000 Valerian soldiers had surrendered. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had won a major conventional battle. News of the victory spread across the globe and beyond. Dr. Hye Jin made sure that every species in the galaxy heard about humanity's success. Her broadcasts, sent using captured Valerian communication equipment, reached dozens of worlds where enslaved populations were watching Earth's war with growing hope. People of the galaxy, she announced in a dozen different languages. Today, human forces liberated the city of Busan from Valerian occupation. We have proven that the Empire can be defeated in direct combat. Your chains can be broken. Your freedom can be won. The response was immediate and dramatic. Uprisings began on 17 different worlds. Species that had been enslaved for decades suddenly found the courage to fight back. The Valerian Empire, which had seemed unshakable for centuries, began to crack under the pressure of simultaneous rebellions. Commander Subin received the news while interrogating captured Valerian officers in the underground facility that had once been Sol's subway system. The aliens' responses told her everything she needed to know about the state of enemy morale. "Your empire is falling apart," she told the Valerian captain sitting across from her. "Your own people are beginning to question whether this war can be won." The alien's response surprised her. Instead of defiance or anger, she saw something that looked almost like relief in his eyes. "You are correct," he said quietly. "Many of us no longer believe in victory. Your species has shown us something we thought impossible, that the Empire can be defeated." "Then surrender," Subin suggested. "Tell your remaining forces to lay down their weapons. End this war before more of your people die." The Valerian captain was quiet for a long moment. "I will consider your words," he finally said. That evening, Subin received reports of the first large-scale Valerian surrenders. Entire units were laying down their weapons rather than continue fighting a war they no longer believed they could win. But not all Valerians were ready to give up. In the deepest levels of space, War Prime Zethkul's replacement was preparing, something desperate. Grand Admiral Kethavar had been called out of retirement to save the Empire's reputation. His solution was simple and terrible. If the Valerians could not conquer Earth, they would destroy it. The Worldbreaker was already moving toward the solar system, a moon-sized weapon designed to crack planets and end civilizations. It had been used only twice before in Valerian history, against species that had proven irredeemably hostile to Imperial rule. Intelligence officer Ye Jin discovered the weapon's approach while monitoring deep space communications from her hidden facility in the Korean mountains. The intercepts were fragmented and heavily encrypted, but the message was clear. The Valerians were preparing to destroy Earth rather than admit defeat. "We have 72 hours, she reported to the Emergency Command Council. "Maybe less." President Kyung-soo felt the weight of his species' survival pressing down on him. "What are our options?" "The Worldbreaker is massive but not invulnerable," Admiral Dongwu replied via secure communication from his flagship. "It relies on enslaved populations to operate its core systems. If we can reach those populations, it's a suicide mission," Captain Unsu added from the Liberty's Edge. "The weapon is surrounded by the largest fleet the Valerians have ever assembled." "Then we make it count," Dongwu said simply. "Humanity didn't come this far just to roll over and die now, they be." Final preparations began immediately. Every human ship in the solar system was recalled for the desperate assault on the Worldbreaker. Captured Valerian vessels were loaded with human volunteers. Even civilian ships were armed with whatever weapons could be mounted on their hulls. Dr. Heejin prepared one final broadcast, knowing it might be her last. The message would go out to every world in the galaxy, telling them that humanity's final battle was about to begin. "People of the galaxy," she announced, "in 72 hours, the Valerian Empire will attempt to destroy Earth with their ultimate weapon. We will fight them with everything we have. If we fall, remember us. If we succeed, remember that freedom is always worth the price." As human forces gathered for the battle that would determine their species' fate, captured Valerian soldiers watched in amazement. They had expected the humans to panic or despair when faced with the Worldbreaker. Instead, they saw a species preparing to fight to the very end. "Why do they not surrender?" asked one confused alien prisoner. Commander Subin smiled grimly. "Because we're human," she said, "and humans don't know how to quit." The hunters had become the hunted, but the final hunt was yet to begin. Everything that had come before, the guerrilla warfare, the space battles, the captured ships and liberated cities, had been preparation for this moment. Humanity was about to face their greatest test, and the galaxy was watching to see if the species that had taught everyone else how to fight could survive their own final battle. The Worldbreaker emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. It was not just a ship but an artificial moon, its surface covered with weapons that could shatter planets. Around it moved the largest Valerian fleet ever assembled. 500 warships protecting the Empire's ultimate weapon. Admiral Dongwu stood on the bridge of his flagship, Seoul's Fury, watching the massive weapon approach Earth. His own fleet seemed tiny in comparison, barely 200 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels crewed by volunteers who had never expected to fight a space war. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the enemy fleet is moving into bombardment formation. The Worldbreaker will be in firing position in 6 hours. Dongwu nodded calmly. 6 hours to save humanity. 6 hours to prove that courage could overcome any odds. "Signal all ships," he commanded. "Operation Final Stand begins now." Across the solar system, human forces began their desperate attack. The plan was complex but simple. While the main fleet engaged the Valyrian escorts, special teams would board the Worldbreaker itself and sabotage it from within. Captain Yun-Su led the first boarding assault aboard the Liberty's Edge. Her ship, disguised as a damaged Valyrian vessel, approached the massive weapon while sending false distress signals. "This is Cruiser Vexmar requesting emergency docking," she broadcast in perfect Valyrian. "We have critical system failures and require immediate assistance." The deception worked perfectly. The Worldbreaker's crew, focused on preparing their ultimate weapon, allowed the Liberty's Edge to dock without suspicion. Only when Yun-Su's teams poured out of the ship with weapons blazing did they realize their mistake. But the most important part of the mission belonged to engineer Jae-hyun. His small team had one objective: reach the Worldbreaker's core and disable the weapon before it could destroy Earth. Jae-hyun had studied every piece of captured Valyrian technology for months, learning how their systems worked. The Worldbreaker was massive and complex, but all weapons had weaknesses. His job was to find this one's vulnerability and exploit it. "The core is this way," he told his team, following schematics downloaded from captured Valyrian databases. "Remember, we're not here to fight. We're here to break things." As they moved through the weapons corridors, Jae-hyun's team discovered something that changed everything. The Worldbreaker was not operated by Valyrian crews alone. Throughout the massive structure, they found enslaved aliens from dozens of different species forced to work as living components of the ultimate weapon. "My God," whispered one of Jae-hyun's soldiers. "They're using prisoners as slave labor." The enslaved workers looked up in amazement as human soldiers appeared among them. Many had been prisoners for decades, forced to maintain the weapon that had destroyed their own worlds. "We're here to free you," Jae-hyun announced in several languages. "Help us destroy this thing, and we can all go home." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of enslaved aliens turned against their Valyrian overseers, using their intimate knowledge of the weapons systems to guide human sabotage teams to critical components. In space, the main battle raged around Earth's orbit. Admiral Dongwu's fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with the fury of people defending their home. Human ships threw themselves at Valyrian vessels in desperate ramming attacks, while others used guerrilla tactics to strike at the enemy fleets. "Weak points. Seoul's Fury to all ships," Dongwu broadcast. "Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting for every species that the Valyrians have enslaved. Today, we end their empire forever." Dr. Hye-jin coordinated the battle from her command center on Earth, broadcasting everything to the galaxy. Species on dozens of worlds watched as humanity threw everything they had at the Empire's ultimate weapon. "People of the galaxy," she announced, "the final battle has begun. Human forces are engaging the Worldbreaker directly. Whatever happens here today will determine the future of freedom in our galaxy." The broadcasts had their intended effect. On world after world, enslaved populations rose in rebellion. The Valyrian Empire found itself fighting not just humanity, but dozens of species that had suddenly rediscovered their courage. Inside the Worldbreaker, Jae-hyun's team reached the weapon's core. The sight that greeted them was both terrible and magnificent. A massive chamber filled with exotic energy systems and quantum field generators, all controlled by more enslaved aliens who had been forced to become living components of the ultimate weapon. "This is it," Jae-hyun said, studying the core's design. "If we can overload the primary field generators, the whole weapon will tear itself apart." But as he began setting charges, Alarms started blaring throughout the massive structure. Valerian reinforcements were moving to protect the core. "Sir," called one of his soldiers, "we have company coming. Lots of company." "Then we hold them off," Jae-hyun replied simply. "Whatever it takes." The battle for the World Breaker's core was brutal and desperate. Human soldiers and freed alien slaves fought side by side against Valerian troops in the corridors surrounding the weapon's heart. The fighting was close quarters and vicious, with both sides knowing that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Commander Minho arrived with reinforcements just as Jae-hyun's position was about to be overrun. His lunar marines had been fighting Valerians for months and knew exactly how to handle them in close combat. "The cavalry has arrived," he announced over the radio. "Hold position while we set the charges." As the battle raged around them, Jae-hyun and his engineers worked frantically to sabotage the weapon's core. The enslaved aliens helped them, their knowledge of the systems proving invaluable in finding the most vulnerable components. "Charges set," Jae-hyun finally announced. "Everyone out. This place is going to blow in 60 seconds. The evacuation was chaos. Human soldiers and freed aliens ran through corridors filled with smoke and debris while Valerian troops tried desperately to stop them. But it was too late. The explosion, when it came, tore through the World Breaker's core like a chain reaction. Field generators overloaded, containment systems failed, and the weapon that had been designed to destroy planets began to destroy itself instead. Admiral Dongwoo watched from his flagship as the massive weapon convulsed and began to break apart. Explosions rippled across its surface as internal systems failed in cascade. But the Admiral would not live to see the final victory. A Valerian dreadnought, making a desperate attack run on Sol's fury, managed to penetrate the ship's defenses. As his flagship began to break apart around him, Dongwoo made one final decision. "All hands abandon ship," he ordered. Then, to his helmsman, "Set course for the World Breaker's core, full ramming speed." Sol's fury, its hull cracked and burning, accelerated toward the dying weapon. Dongwoo stood on his bridge as the ship plunged into the heart of the World Breaker, adding its destruction to the chain reaction already tearing the massive weapon apart. The explosion was visible from across the solar system. The World Breaker, the Empire's ultimate weapon, died in a burst of light that could be seen from Earth's surface. With their ultimate weapon destroyed, and their fleet in chaos, the remaining Valerian forces began to surrender. Many had been fighting, only because they feared their own commanders more than the humans. With those commanders dead or captured, they saw no reason to continue a hopeless war. Dr. Hye-jin broadcast the news of victory to the galaxy. "People of all worlds," she announced, "the World Breaker is destroyed. The Valerian fleet is defeated. The empire that enslaved you for centuries has fallen. You are free." The response was immediate and overwhelming. On every world the Valerians had conquered, populations rose in celebration and rebellion. The empire, already weakened by months of human resistance, collapsed completely within days. War Prime Zethkal, still a prisoner in human custody, watched the reports of his empire's fall with something approaching relief. "You have done something impossible," he told his guards. "You have freed the galaxy." 5 years after the World Breaker's destruction, Ambassador Hee-jin stood before the Galactic Liberation Council in what had once been the Valerian capital. The building had been transformed from a symbol of oppression into a meeting place for free species from across the galaxy. 5 years ago, she told the assembled representatives, humanity faced extinction. Today, we gather as equals in a galaxy where freedom has replaced fear, where cooperation has replaced conquest. The humans who had once faced the Empire's overwhelming power now served as protectors and advisors to species rebuilding after centuries of slavery. Captain Yoon-soo commanded a fleet of exploration vessels, searching for lost colonies and forgotten worlds. Engineer Jae-hyun led teams teaching liberated species how to rebuild their technology and infrastructure. On Earth, monuments stood to honor those who had given their lives for freedom. Admiral Dongwoo's statue in Seoul bore a simple inscription. He taught the galaxy that courage is stronger than fear. The Valerian Empire was gone, replaced by a confederation of free worlds working together to explore the galaxy and protect the weak. The species that had expected easy obedience from humanity had instead found war at their gates, and in losing that war had lost everything. But in their defeat, something greater had been born. A galaxy where freedom was protected,